We are with another live, watching as people sort of make it their way in as the notifications go out. Very exciting. Hello, hello. As you come on in, say hello in the chat. That tea is very hot today. I'm excited to be talking about boundaries and ethics today. Okay. Usually takes a minute or two for all of the notifications to go out and for people to come on in. I will get started at about 2 after the hour with the introduction. Really interesting little story that sort of informs this topic today. Actually happened just this morning. I was in a non-monogamy group, a channel actually on my local Discord, and somebody posted a link to a writing about non-monogamy, about opening up relationships. And in this writing, there were several points made where somebody, the person who was writing this article, said, that's creepy, that's disgusting, that's gross, about other people's relationships. And so I think that illustrates, this sort of boundaries are the flip side of ethics. Ethics are the flip side of boundaries, type of relationship, in that as long as we feel it's appropriate to judge others and say hateful things about their chosen style of relationship, or about how they live their lives, or about who they are as people, then we are then making it okay for them to judge ours. So, okay, it is 2 after the hour. Thank you, Cobalt. I did not make them. I actually bought them from, I think, like an 8 or 9-year-old at some point who was selling them for, I don't know, to raise money for something or another. They had made the earrings, and I think I paid like $15 for them or something like that, but for a good cause. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Heather. My pronouns are she, hers. Most people call me Nookie. In addition to living my most amazing personal life, I write books and teach classes and workshops like this about love, sex, romance, and kink for people of all genders, relationship statuses, orientations, and more. I've always been curious and adventurous when it comes to sex, and luckily I've had partners who have been the same. So I have had the opportunity to explore many facets of sexuality in loving and creative ways. And all that to say that my experiences, the wild and varied experiences that I've had thus far, have led me to the belief that boundaries are the key, not only to saving ourselves, but our relationships. Boundaries are what take us from getting by or merely average to healthy, loving, strong, and fan-fucking-tastic. So let's get started. Today, I wanted to talk to you about boundaries and ethics. Now, I haven't gotten this far in the book as I'm writing it yet. I'm actually, that's actually a little further along in the book, beyond the 6 types of boundaries. And right now I am working on the 3rd type of boundary. I've done sexual boundaries so far. I've done emotional boundaries so far. And just today I posted physical boundaries. Once I'm done with the 6 different types of boundaries, I will talk a little bit about boundaries and ethics being 2 sides of the same coin. But I wanted to talk about that today and take your questions about the idea. Because if you do have questions about the idea, that might inform how I write about this. So here's my presentation to you. Boundaries and ethics, 2 sides of the same concept. Boundaries are how you allow people to treat you. Ethics are how you are willing to treat other people, boiled down into a very simple concept. Now, of course, I'm writing an entire book about boundaries and what they are and how we can break them up into different categories and how we can make better boundaries and enforce them and interact with people and communicate about them. Hello, Womanopolis. It's good to see you. Um, but let's talk a little bit about ethics, shall we? Um, and I will tell you this, I am a super geek about these things. My father is a retired philosophy professor, and these types of concepts and ideas are things that were discussed with me from a young age by my parents or in books that were left around the house for me to like poke through and read. My father has had conversations with me about the business of ethics and the ethics of business. And it's been a part of my life to think about these things. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that many of those early conversations that I had have informed how I think moving into my adult life. And then from my adult life into what I like to consider my authentic life. So let's talk a little bit about ethics. So, ethics defined are the moral principles that govern a person's or a group's behavior, right? So, ethics are not universal. What is right for me is not necessarily going to be right for you. Or what is right for you is not necessarily going to be right for your partner, just like what is right for your family may not be right for another person's family, and so on and so forth, right? So, this is very key. And one of the reasons it's incredibly key is because when we use the word ethics, when we're talking to somebody, we generally mean our ethics, right? And so, but we don't necessarily mean that about boundaries. When we talk about someone's boundaries, when we talk about our boundaries, we understand that our boundaries tend to be our own. But we have a hard time intellectually flipping that around and understanding that ethics are also not universal. And that's important because many of us use the term ethical non monogamy, for example, to describe how we practice non monogamy. But what does that mean if my ethics are unique to me and they may differ from your ethics? Right? It means having a conversation. Cobalt says, like the post about slut shaming, some people couldn't let others have their own ethics. Absolutely. That's absolutely key. So I wrote a post about slut shaming and saying that slut shaming is rampant in so-called sex positive lifestyles, and talked about how slut shaming actually hurts us all. And that brings us down to exactly this. When we presume to judge and criticize others for their choices, we are then opening up the door for them to judge and criticize us for our choices, even on things that have no need for outside input or judgment. So, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. So, ethics are a set of moral principles that guide a person's behavior. These moral principles are shaped by social norms, right? Where were we raised and what are the social norms there? So, what might be a social norm where I live right now in Raleigh, North Carolina, versus, I don't know, Stamford, North Carolina, which is a little ways away, but much smaller and more insular, could be radically different, even though they're in the same state and within 100 miles of each other, right? Cultural practices play a part. Right? What culture were we raised in? Religious influences. Womanopolis says ethics aren't social codes, they are taught in schools and colleges. So, ethics are a type of social code. Like I mentioned earlier, ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior, but they could also govern a group's behavior. So, for example, when you talk about professional ethics, you might have a professional group for whatever it is that you do, right? So, like therapists, for example. Um, Therapists have a very specific governing body of ethics that they have to adhere to in order to be considered professional, right? So, in that sense, ethics are social codes. Cobalt said, did you mean taught? So, yes, probably. Ethics are taught that way in schools and colleges. But that's the difference, is that ethics for an individual, right, versus ethics for a society or ethics for a profession can be radically different. And this is where communication comes into play. So, ethics reflect beliefs about what is right, what is wrong, what is just and what is unjust, what is good, what is bad, in terms of human behavior, right? So they serve as a compass or a guide, a map to direct how people should behave towards each other, and how we understand and fulfill our obligations to society, how we live our lives, and how we practice in our professions. Does that make sense to everyone? Are you with me on this one? Um, so, like, for example, on OkCupid, when they had all of those questions, I don't know if they still do have all those questions. I know that the last time I was on OkCupid, those questions were not as prominent as they once used to be. And that's what I used to really love about OkCupid. So I haven't been on there in forever. But in OkCupid, they used to have this question that was, is morality universal? Right? And I always thought that was a really interesting question. And I used it in part when I saw that people had answered it. I used their answers in part to judge whether or not we would make a good fit. Because morality is defined as principles concerning the distinction between right or wrong or good and bad behavior, and is the basis for ethics. Here's the thing, though, your culture influences your morality. Your family influences your morality for good or ill. Your environment influences your morality. Like, what is appropriate in business is not necessarily appropriate in a social situation. Your religion influences your morality. Your experiences and your peer groups also influence your morality to either strengthen or weaken it, right? Cobalt, I will come back to that one that you just asked, because I'm going to definitely touch on that. So I could argue, and I've actually seen argued, this is not only my theory or argument, since no two people can have exactly the same culture, exactly the same family, exactly the same environment, religion, experiences, peer groups, no two people will have exactly the same morality and ethics. Even twins are going to have different experiences with different people throughout their lives, which are going to shape their beliefs. And that's okay. In many cases, it's not going to make any difference at all, right? In other cases, it might be a huge difference that hinge on the tiniest deviation that could lead to war, right? Womanopolis. Oh, Noella. Sorry, got that wrong. Noella. Very interesting. The difference of person A ethics, person B ethics, society C ethics, society D ethics. Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of this right now in cultural engagements online, right? In about politics, but not just about politics, even in groups related to interest. you're going to see, XYZ gardening group over here. And then you're going to see XYZ gardening group dash no judgment over here. And that's because while they might have all shared a love of gardening and an interest in gardening, one group perhaps acted more exclusively than the other group, and the other group felt that that was a breach of ethics and decided to create their own group in order to be more inclusive, more welcoming. And interestingly enough, that actually takes us right back to what Cobalt was asking. Is there a connection between ethics and etiquette? So etiquette is like laws or rules, right? It is formalized behavior towards others. So if you are taught very specific things about etiquette, what is right and what is wrong, then you are going to believe that this sort of behavior represents right and wrong in the world, right? People who are good do the right things. People who are bad do the wrong things. However, ethics, from my standpoint, are just like rules and laws, very rigid. They're very black and white. You use this fork at this time. You say these things in this situation, right? But the world isn't black and white. And that's where we have rules and laws on the one side. I've talked a little bit about this before, and ethics and boundaries on the other. Ethics and boundaries have incredible capacity for not just grayscale, but technicolor, right? It can be everything. It goes in not just one dimension or two dimensions, but 3, 4, 5, or 6 dimensions. There's so much complexity to ethics and boundaries, whereas rules and laws are a little less complex. They're more black and white. It's not to say that they can't be made more complex, right? But let's just say, for example, murder is wrong, right? We could probably all agree that murder is wrong, except when it's not. When is murder not wrong, right? For a long time, a lot of people felt it was okay or appropriate to mock people online for bad spelling or poor grammar, right? Some people still do. And yet, online brings people together from all around the world. So do we do that now? Or do we consider the fact that somebody else might be learning our language as a second, third, or fourth language? Or perhaps there's somebody with an amazing idea, but who didn't get a formal education, right? So now do we mock them for the delivery of their message? Or do we engage them on the content of their message, right? Rules and laws versus boundaries and ethics. How do we want people to treat us? How do we allow people to treat us? Boundaries. How do we choose and feel is right or wrong to treat others? Ethics. Cobalt says, I used to obsessively read books on etiquette, but I think I was looking for your boundaries book. Thank you. Really. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm okay. Sabyasachi? I don't know if I got it right. I hope I got it right. Feel free to correct me in the chat if you can make sure that I get it right. Sabyasachi. Well said. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about ethics. So ethics are what we believe is the right thing to do and what we believe is the wrong thing to do. Key point, ethics do not equal action, right? Simply believing that something is right or wrong does not inherently mean that I or you will act upon that belief, right? I believe it is right to give to charity. Does that mean that I'm always going to give to charity? Does it mean that I'm always going to give to charity even when I think I should? No. Ethics do not equal action. Just like setting a boundary and saying, this is how I will accept treatment, is also not enforcing that boundary. It will not stop that treatment from happening necessarily. And I think that's important. So it's easy to believe that because something should be done, because it's right, but that I am not the one to do it because I have greater priorities, a lack of skill set, or just plain apathy. Or maybe in the case of giving to charity, I feel like my budget won't support that right now, right? Another example, I believe that people should be putting more efforts to protecting pangolins in Asia. However, the most I do is share photos and articles on Facebook. I'm not ready to take up that cause any deeper because I have other priorities, like writing my boundaries book and building my boundaries workshop and answering questions from y'all, right? Talking about boundaries and ethics. I do, however, are quokkas. Yes, absolutely, or quokkas, because they're the cutest little marsupials ever. But I'm not down in Australia saving the quokkas. I do go, oh my gosh, squee, every time I see the quokkas on Facebook or social media. But this is a greater priority to me, right? So ethics do not equal action. Ethics do inform action, though. So what we can say is, if I have something that I believe is right, sometimes it'll be a battle between what is right for me and what is just plain right as a more general concept. So that's not necessarily an easy line to figure out. But overall, a person's actions will tell you a lot about their ethics, right? So even small actions like making a Facebook post can mean something. Sometimes as much as a big action. So, for example, flying to Australia to save the quokkas, which I can't, because they don't really allow people without training to do so. In fact, it's illegal to touch one. But I could totes get like the training and the shots and whatever, but then I'd be leaving all of these other things that are right for me, like being a companion to my partner and a friend to those who lean on me, and writing this book and putting together this workshop and all of these things. So even the big actions can tell you more about what a person feels is right for them, right? Rather than what is right in a generalized way. However, rather than taking that one action and trying to extrapolate a person from there, anyone remember the whole, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker thing, and how everybody thought that because they did those things, like they must be amazing, good people, right? Taking one action or even one series of actions and thinking that somebody must be a good person or have good ethics as a result of those things, it will lead you to mistakes. Even believing that because I am teaching a boundaries course and writing a book, that I must be a good person would be a mistake, right? Like that would be a mistake of logic. I'm not saying I'm not a good person. I would like to say I am a good person. But that one series of behaviors does not actually inform you of my overall ethics. So it means taking the time to get to know people, right? Look at their actions as a whole and over time. So assumptions about others' ethics can harm you. Um, it's easy, just like I was saying. Take me, for example. You don't know me. I mean, maybe you know me. For those who read my writings regularly, attend these sessions regularly, watch the videos, um, you might know me, right? But you don't know me well. I mean, you might think, damn, she's talking about ethics. And hey, I pretty much agree with her. She must be ethical. Said like that, it might seem a little bit naive, right? Noelia. And again, if I'm getting that wrong as far as pronunciation, please do let me know. So, which is the best way to get to know people's ethics and boundaries? Good question. Like I said, get to know them over time. Watch them. Look for inconsistencies. And when you see inconsistencies, ask them about it. Hey, you said blah, 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 blah. And I've known you to be the type of person who believed blah, 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 blah. And yet over here, it seems like you did Scooby Doo. Scooby Doo doesn't seem to fit in with blah, 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 blah. How do those go together for you? Not sure. I'm not sure I understand it, right? Ask those questions, have those conversations, get to know people. But the thing is, like, like with me, again, people know me through my writings, through my teachings, sometimes even talking with me a bit here and there. Very, very few know me through any kind of like intimacy, deep friendship, play, sexuality. And yet, people I have never met before will introduce themselves to me and ask me for a scene or play or intimacy because a friend who has been to a class of mine says I'm amazing and their friend barely even knows me. Or people will ask me to help them decide what to do in their relationships just because they've seen me on video or because they've read one of my writings or because they've read my book. And even were I as ethical as they might think I am, there's no reason to believe that I would be the right person to ask about their relationship, right? What I can do in any given relationship situation, and this is my ethics, in a relationship situation, when somebody comes to me and says, hey, what should I do in this situation? I can ask a couple of questions and I can say, what do you feel about this? How do you think about that? Does it hurt you when? I might, in a situation like that, say something like this, right? But tell them what to do. And you see a lot of that online, right? Somebody comes into a relationship group on Facebook or whatever, and they say, hey, I'm having this relationship issue. What do you think? And 50% of the people will jump in and say, oh my gosh, leave them now. They're awful. They're horrible. They're unethical. They're mean, whatever. And that's just from getting this much information from a Facebook post about the entire relationship, right? It's important to think about these things. So I'm not telling you that I'm not trustworthy. I do everything in my power to be so. I'm telling you that you can't know I'm trustworthy until you have spent time observing me and paying attention to who I am as a person in multiple situations. because you don't know that I'm trustworthy unless you know me. And you don't know me unless you spent real time around me, talking to me, watching how I interact with others, learning how my actions and ethics are consistent, right? And you can bet that at some point I'm going to make a mistake. And that one mistake could dog me forever. But that's what happens when you take one action out of the context of many actions, right? So that is just as not okay as assuming someone is safe because of unrelated factors. So let's talk about this going a little further. Oh, Noelia, let's see what we've got here. Do you think personal ethics may change for a certain person? Did you change ever in that aspect? So, yes, because if we look at personal ethics as being the flip side to personal boundaries, what we believe is right and good for one person or one type of person may not be what we believe is right and good for another human or another type of person, right? And so for our boundaries, for example, I have boundaries that apply to certain people in certain situations and absolutely do not apply to other people. So if we look at it that way, our personal ethics absolutely are variable, right? Professional ethics, not so much, right? Because with professional ethics, we have made the promise to apply those equally, equitably to everyone. And that's a key, right? Social ethics. In society, we've already found that there are some people who are more equal than others, right? Is that ethical? Well, in most cases, I would say no. In some cases, though, yes. Like, we tend to give people who have backgrounds in like science and medicine more credence in topics related to science and medicine. Normally, would you do that? I mean, you might not do it for this person, you might do it for that person. Do you believe Dr. Oz? Do you believe your primary care physician? Do you get a second opinion? Right? So there is absolutely your personal ethics and your personal boundaries, and how you navigate the world is in constant flux. So, Womanopolis. I was raised to think well about others, but life has hit me so hard on that. So, let's talk a little bit about that, because that goes to boundaries and again to ethics. So, when it comes to boundaries, one of the things that I hear from a lot of people is I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I treat everyone in X and so ways. I go out of my way for people because I believe that is right. This is ethics. The challenge is, where are the boundaries to go with that? Where is the stop sign, right? Where is the part of you where you say, you know what? I can think well of that person without putting myself at risk, without giving everything I have to them when I can't afford to lose it. That's the challenge. Also, keep in mind, just like with boundaries, so we have been told a good portion of our lives that we should do we should smile for others because that'll make them feel better, right? Or we shouldn't. We should hug our aunts when we're told to hug our aunts because they're family and we have to hug family or whatever it is. We are told that if we set boundaries, that people won't love us as much, and we're not told this. Most of the times, we're not told this by people who mean us harm. In fact, we're often told this by people who mean us well. So people who told you to think well about others, they meant well for you. Because honestly, if you can think well about others, mentally speaking, you're going to be healthier. You're going to be better off. You, not just them, but you. Remember, we were talking about threat brain, drive brain, and safe brain. If you are constantly under threat by thinking ill about others, that's going to harm you, right? Versus drive or feeling safe. But the challenge is the people who tell you that in order for them to feel like you think well of them, and there you go, there's that follow-up. What about pleasing others all the time or giving a good first impression? Here's what I'll tell you about that. A good first impression is nice. It is nice to have. I mean, it is wonderful for me to be able to say to you, it is lovely to have you here, Womanopolis. Thank you so much for joining me, and give you a smile, right? It is wonderful to be able to do that and for you to be able to think, gosh, this woman is nice. But pleasing others. When I hear someone say, I am a people pleaser, I know that they have 98% chance probability of having poor boundaries. And that's the challenge. Poor boundaries. Because when we are busy pleasing others at our expense, we lose. We lose every time. Even if they are good people, we lose every time because it's at our expense. And if we don't have it to give, we shouldn't be giving it, no matter how wonderful they are. Right? Ethics is not getting road rage at the person who cut you off. Boundaries are changing lanes to stay safe. Ooh. Right? Ethics is not yelling at someone just because you're irritated and you've had a bad day. Boundaries is not allowing somebody to yell at you just because they are irritated and had a bad day. Right? So when we talk about how we would like to be treated, and we talk about how to treat others, one of the most harmful concepts I think we grew up with, and if you're in the chat, let me know if you grew up with this one, the golden rule. How many of you were taught the golden rule? Treat others as you would have them treat you. And that is, sadly, a good concept, except that how we apply it as humans is critically flawed. Because we as humans are not taught to step outside of our own minds. So let's just take an example, right? I think most people have had the experience of being in a relationship and saying to someone else, hey, when you did this thing, it really upset or hurt me. And having that other person say, well, if you did that to me, it wouldn't hurt me. Right? We've all experienced that. Cobalt says, the Jewish version is similar. Do not do anything to others that you would not want done to you. It's actually more specific. Sure, it's still the same problem, though. It's still the same challenge. Because if you take it at face value, I might want you to kiss me, so therefore I kiss you. But what if you don't want to be kissed? What if you hate kissing? But I'm treating you as I would want to be treated. Which is one of the reasons that I really like to promote the platinum rule. Treat others as they want to be treated and use boundaries to show others how you want to be treated. So, ethics would be I would want somebody to care about my feelings. Therefore, I will care about their feelings. My boundary is I will not be in a relationship with somebody who invalidates my emotions. Therefore, I believe it is right in a relationship to validate the emotions of my partner. It doesn't mean, well, I wouldn't get jealous if you flirted with somebody else. So therefore, ethics say, you can't get jealous if I flirt with somebody else. It doesn't work that way, right? We are not exactly the same people. We don't have the same boundaries, and we don't have the same ethics. Cobalt, you're asking, do you treat yourself the same? Can you expand on that? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. So, I talked a bit. I have ADHD, and I talked a bit with my mental health professional about this when we had a little bit of extra time. And she said, yeah, you can talk to me about anything. And I'm like, well, it has to do with what I'm writing, and it has to do with what that, yes, we absolutely had boundaries and ethics in the way that I framed it as two sides of the same coin. Here's something else. And this is something that I'm working on. This is part of what's going into the book. And this is also part of what's going into the workshop is when you are in crisis, when your threat brain is engaged, right? And you go into your 5 F's: fight, flight, freeze, friend, or flop. When your threat brain is engaged, all of the thought processes that go into your boundaries and ethics, all those gray areas, all those multicolored things, they get reduced down to black and white because you're in threat mode, right? That's when laws and rules come into play. And if you build your laws and rules based on your boundaries and ethics during a time when you are calm and you are able to think things through, then those rules and laws are there for you when you're in threat and crisis mode. And that is something I'm very excited about when it comes to this book and it comes to the workshop that I'm working on. Do you validate your own feelings? I do. Yeah. And how I validate my own feelings is related to sitting and accepting that I have these feelings, understanding that um, emotions are something everybody experiences, and they are messages from my brain to me about something. My feelings, my emotions are valid 100%. That doesn't validate the behavior I might take part in as a result of them. That's where we tend to get stuck, right? So having feelings is 100% valid. Taking those feelings out on other people or using them to excuse unethical behavior is something else entirely. So, for those of you who do not know, right now I am writing my new book. Working title is Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck. And you can get access to the chapters as I write and post them. And if you would like to join me as I write that book, like I said, I just posted the physical boundaries chapter today. I just a link into the F-live. That's curiouser.me/BASF-live. If you would like to join me as I write that book and read the book as I write it, work on your boundaries, ask questions, engage in the private community I have built for it, please do. Plus, everyone who participates in that live write with me will get a on the workshop that I am building as well. So I am building concurrently to writing the book. I am building the Take No Shit workshop, which the book is sort of like a deep dive into everything boundaries. What are they? Why do we have them? Why do we want them? And the workshop is more like, buckle up, bitches. We are building boundaries. So, yeah. Womanopolis, your transmission is blinking. I actually, I'm getting some signals that the connection is not great today. So it could be that, and I really do apologize for any bad signals or missed information. So don't hesitate to ask questions if you miss something. So Sabyasachi says, Miss Nookie, how does anyone get to correct about boundaries if they accidentally cross it? Okay, so again, this kind of goes to ethics, right? If you say to somebody, hey, this thing really bothers me. I would appreciate it if you don't do it again, right? If you say that to somebody, what would you hope for in return? I'm sorry. I had no idea. Can you tell me more? I will do my best not to try it, to try not to do that again, right? Um, Generally speaking, offering the same in return. An apology if it's warranted. Um, a request for more information to make sure you understand the boundary, and your best attempts to not step on that boundary again or cross that boundary or push that boundary, right? Very simple. It's authentic concern and care. And if you can provide that more often than not, that's all you need to do. Because doing your best to not harm somebody again is a big fucking deal. Like something as simple as um, maybe um, somebody from your childhood used to call you Sab, right? And you hate that. You hate that. You don't mind Sabia, right? I don't know if you do or not, just giving some examples, but maybe you hate Sab. And so you meet a new friend and you're totally vibing and you're hanging out. And after a couple of weeks, they send you a text message or they give you a call and they're like, hey, Sab, want to hang on Wednesday? And you say, I'd love to hang out on Wednesday. Could you please never call me Sab? I hate it. I don't know why I hate it. I've hated it since I was a kid. People have called me that for, over and over and over again, and I've never, ever liked it. You may call me Sabya, and that's okay. Or you may call me S, or, please use my full name. It's really important to me. And let's say that they said, oh shit, I'm sorry, I had no idea. I will do my best to never do that again. And then what? They never do that again. How is that going to make you feel? It's going to make you feel like they care, right? Like they give a shit. Same thing. Just turn it around. They don't need to throw themselves at you. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry that I called you that. I just came out and oh my goodness, please forgive me. You don't need to do that. They don't need to make it all about them. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I will never do that again. Bam. Right? Simple. Cobalt says, the book that I'm writing, that is, to use a Nookieism, fuckball's amazing. Thank you. My son once said, I'm not Jake, I'm Jacob. And so it has been since. Absolutely. One of my childhood friends went by Rick for years and years and years and years. And then somewhere in his adult age, he decided to go by Richard. And I have to admit, it did take me a while to make that change, but I made the change. Rick is not who he is anymore. He's now Richard. It's okay. It's all right? Simple. Oh shit, I did it again. So sorry, Richard. Just like that. Super easy peasy. You are very welcome. Okay. Are there any additional questions on boundaries and ethics or boundaries in general that I can answer for you today before I sign off? Again, I'm going to pop the link for the live write into the chat. I'm going to go ahead. I'll show that right there. curiouser.me/BASF-live. So if you'd like to join the live write, please do. You can put your first name or your nickname or whatever you choose to go by in the first name. You do not have to put your last name in the last name. Some people put in their pronouns like she/her. Some people put in, like their first name, John, and then in the last name, they put AKA J. It's up to you. You can maintain as much anonymity as you'd like. There is a wide group of people in there, from kinky folk, non-monogamy folk, vanilla folk, trans folk, queer folk, all across the spectrum. So we're being very inclusive, and we want to help everybody of all genders, relationship status, orientations, and more to build better boundaries. Womanopolis says, aren't we staying away from BDSM? Are we? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you asking if this is unrelated to BDSM? Because I would say it is absolutely not unrelated to BDSM. It's not unrelated. In fact, this is directly related to how we handle our relationships in kink, BDSM, in non-monogamy, in monogamy, in our friendships. All of this is critical to how we live our lives in kink and outside of kink. Okay, so I don't see any additional questions, so I'm going to thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm Nookie, or Heather Claus. I'm currently writing my next book. Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck is the working title, and I'm writing it live. Join me with the link in the chat, and have an amazing Thursday. Next week on Tuesday, I'm going to be doing another round, and it is going to be, what am I talking about next week? Oh, soft boundaries are not your fault. So I'm going to be talking about how many of us are not raised with good boundaries and how it's not your fault, but it is absolutely your responsibility, and what we can do to start taking those steps. So have an amazing day. I'll look forward to either seeing you in the Boundaries book. I hope to see you in the Boundaries book, or next week. Tuesdays are at noon Eastern. Thursdays are at 2 Eastern. So just a little different. I wanted to give some time for different time zones. So thank you all. Have an amazing day.